What's up, everyone? It's Tyler with Mom's Basement MMA, and this week we are going to break down and offer predictions for LFA 168. Last week, LFA 167, we did okay. We hit on the Ashley Nichols pick. We hit on the Jeff Craig pick as well. One of our picks, that bout ends up falling through, and then Jonathan Piersma, we picked him. He ends up getting caught, but overall, we did okay for LFA 167. Let's see how well we do for LFA 168. This is a stacked card from top to bottom. I do think these bouts are going to be a little bit trickier to pick this week. Let's see how well we do. Okay, guys, so this is the very first fight of the main card as of September 17th, 2023. Keep in mind, some of these might fall off, the orders might change, but as of today, this is the first fight that we are going to see when we tune into LFA 168. It's a contest between Quang Le when he takes on Sal Guerriero. Guerriero trains out of American Top Team. He is making the trip over to Minnesota to take on the undefeated Le. A few things about Guerriero. His MMA career, he's had some mixed success. He's won the fights that he should have won, but as he scales up in the competition, frankly, the results have not been there. The fight against Wendell Araujo was kind of wild. A difficult fight to score. I suggest tuning into that one. That fight is available on UFC Fight Pass, and you'll get kind of a rough idea of what it is that he likes to do. From what I can discern from Sal Guerriero, he wants to grapple, he wants to wrestle, he uses his striking to set up that level change fairly early on. And that seems to be kind of like the cadence he likes to fight at. High pressure, strikes, he'll throw a 1-2 and then shoot. Pressure, 1-2, shoot. He has a few other things as well. But one of the things that I want to see for this fight is he going to employ a similar game plan going up against Quang Le? Quang Le, an undefeated fighter, he has gone up against two opponents back to back that have tried to wrestle and grapple with him for 15 minutes. Neither of those guys have got it done. So I really want to see, what is Sal Guerriero's plan? If he is looking to emulate what he has done in the past, he may not find a lot of success. He may need to give Le a different look, because Sam Painance, he tried to do the exact same thing. He tried to grapple and wrestle with Le the entire time. Painance, he got the first round. He won the first round, but Le was able to turn the tables on him and exhaust Painance. He also did the exact same thing against Henry Huff and ends up getting a submission off of him. Le will grapple with you if you make him. He's actually a very good grappler. He's very strong in the clinch. He can reverse position really well. And he also has 3 submissions under his belt as well. So if you want to take it there, he'll happily oblige. Le's striking certainly stands out. Great cardio. He's a very intelligent fighter, in my opinion. He can make adjustments really well. Guerriero, if he isn't able to get the finish in the first round, I would actually expect Guerriero to win the first round, but then look for Le to make adjustments and look for him to really emphasize on the striking. I do think Le's the better striker than Guerriero, but it'll remain to be seen what ends up happening when these two meet in the cage. But if I had to make a lean on this fight, I'm going with Le. I like Le's fight IQ quite a bit. I think he's a very good grappler. I just think he's the more well-rounded fighter with more tools to get the job done in his toolbox compared to Guerriero. I do like Guerriero. I give him a lot of respect for taking this fight. This is not an easy fight for him to take. He's fighting Le in his backyard. But hey, you know what? Fortune favors the bold. He's making the trip to take a tough fight. That's to be commended. But my lean is on Le. I think that's the right guy for this one. And we'll see what ends up happening. A win over Guerriero, that puts him at 6-0. The problem though is he's 31 years old. And at a bantamweight class that's loaded in the UFC, is that going to be enough to get on their radar? He's really going to need to impress in order to make that jump up in competition. Okay, guys, we are moving on up the card. The next fight is going to be a flyweight contest between Antoine Ho when he takes on Gennrich Latchman. Antoine Ho, a lot to like about him. An undefeated 4-0 flyweight prospect. He's only 22 years old and a ton of success. You know why he's called the highlight. Three finishes in his first three fights, and then he gets a unanimous decision victory at LFA 158 against Edwin De Los Santos a few months back. He goes up against Gennrich Latchman. Gennrich Latchman, once upon a time, was a highly touted prospect. He was a 5-1 guy, but as his career has unfolded, just really the results have not been there. I will say it's important to note that over the recent years, he's been on the wrong end of three different split decisions. But let's call it for what it is. They are bringing in Gennrich Latchman because they are trying to build up Antoine Ho. I mean, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but let's be honest here. That's exactly what's happening. They are bringing in Latchman to lose to Antoine Ho. For Ho, this bout does make sense. He is 4-0, but he really hasn't fought a lot of guys with a ton of experience. That'll change with Latchman, who has 18 professional fights to his name. One thing about Ho, yes, he's young. Yes, he's exciting, but his wins just really haven't aged all that well. He has yet to fight a guy that currently has a winning record. So look at all of his previous wins and look at where those opponents are now. They really haven't found the most success. It's an indicator that he may not be going up against the toughest guys. But hey, I'm not trying to bust his chops. He's only 22 years old, 4-0. He's got plenty of time. And, let's give his coaches credit. Let's give him credit too. He's taking fights that make sense. He's not rushing into anything. He's got plenty of time. But what I would like to see, if Antoine Ho can beat Gennrich Latchman, I would like to see him fight the winner of Aaron Lafarge and Alden Correa, or maybe fighting against Terrence Saturn again, a guy that he met in the amateur ranks. I think that would also be an interesting fight. A win over Latchman will put Antoine Ho at 5-0, and that a fight with any of those names that I just mentioned, I'd like to see moving forward. I like Antoine Ho. He has a lot of promise, a lot of potential, but Antoine Ho's the pick here. Okay, guys, we are moving up into the middleweight ranks when Colin Huckbody goes up against Sean Fallon. Both of these guys are somewhat similar, same height, same size. Both of them have had a lot of success with getting submission finishes. I'm curious to see, how does each man approach the other. Colin Huckbody, I think of wrestling right away. I think about a guy that wants to take fights to the ground and ground and pound and make you grapple. And when you're tired, he goes for the choke. The problem, though, is Sean Fallon is going to be more than happy to take a fight to the ground. 10 of Fallon's victories have come by way of submission. So I'm comfortable calling Fallon a submission specialist. This is a fight that Huckbody needs badly. He needs to get back into that win column to stay on the radar of a major MMA promotion. Colin Huckbody, he's still very young and he checks all the right boxes. He's a former Dana White Contender Series veteran. He's the former CFFC middleweight champion. And for quite some time, he was Tapology's #1 middleweight contender in the United States. Huckbody dropped his last fight against Nick Klein not that long ago. And to be frank, that's not the most flattering loss to have on his record. But if you do a little more research on Nick Klein, you'll see that he's actually quite talented. He's not a jobber. He's not a can. He's actually quite good. Nick Klein was a 7-1 amateur fighter, and now he's 3-1 as a pro, and he's the 17th ranked middleweight in the country on Tapology. So, fortunately for Colin, I do think that loss will age quite well. I think Nick Klein is very talented, very gifted. But when we look at both of these contenders and kind of where they are, Fallon's 37, probably putting a bow on his career. I did watch some recent fights for Fallon, and I did watch this one against Chance Beck. You could see that early on in that fight, he did encounter some adversity. He ends up getting clipped. I thought that Beck was getting ready to put him away, but he ends up pulling through and he ends up getting the win. I'm curious to see how both each of these men approach the other, knowing that Huckbody is a great wrestler. He wants this fight down to the ground. And if you're Fallon, do you let him just take you down to the ground? And are you content to work off your back and try to catch Colin Huckbody in a submission? I think the key to this fight is who can really put a stamp on it in the striking department. Neither are really synonymous with striking. I think of Fallon, I think of submissions, I think of jiu-jitsu. For Colin, I think of wrestling right away. So I'm curious to see, are either of these men capable of really putting a stamp on this fight with the striking? It'll I think whoever can find the most success in the striking department is probably who's going to end up winning this fight. If I had to put a lean on it one way or the other, I have to go Colin Huckbody on this one. There are a few reasons why. He encountered some adversity in and outside of the ring for his most recent fight. I'm not going to get too much into that, but if you know who Colin is and if you know where he trains, you'll understand what I'm referencing here. But for Huckbody, I think that in the months away from competition, I think he's going to be retooled, refocused. I think his issues are taken care of. And I think you're going to see a very dangerous, a very motivated, and a very hungry Colin Huckbody. He still has some time to make a UFC run. When I interviewed him a few months back, he did mention to me that Josh Fremd was a contender that he wants to see. Well, in order to get an opportunity to fight somebody like Josh, he needs to win this fight. So we'll see what happens. A win over Fallon will put Colin Huckbody at 13-5. Possibly, if PFL decides they want to run middleweights next year, would not surprise me to see him there. But he certainly needs to get a victory over Fallon in order to stay on the radar. And I think he will. Okay, guys, the next fight's a lightweight contest between Donald Bush and Keegan Gennrich. This is an interesting one. Bush is 8-2, and 7 of his 8 victories as a pro have come by way of submission. So, fighting on the ground is something that he is very comfortable in doing. He's currently on a 2-fight winning streak right now. He just beat a 15-14 guy a few months back, and then prior to that, he beats Jimmy Padilla via arm triangle submission. He'll be going up against Keegan Gennrich, who is a decorated wrestler and somebody that really made a huge statement out in the LFA cage when he took on Richie Miranda not that long ago. It officially is tallied as a split decision for Gennrich, but I did think that Keegan did enough in order to win the fight. He certainly lost the 3rd round. There's no debating that, but I did think he did enough to win rounds 1 and 2. Nonetheless, getting a victory over a fighter on the caliber of Richie Miranda, that's saying something to me. He's got to be more than comfortable going up against Bush, even though Bush comes to this table with that submission threat. Gennrich fought Austin Luchin not that long ago. Austin Luchin is a highly skilled jiu-jitsu player as well. And Keegan was able to nullify Austin's submission attempts throughout the course of the fight. Very, very good top control. I don't expect Donald Bush's submission threats to deter Keegan from wanting to wrestle and grapple and take this fight down to the ground. I'm not expecting that at all. I'm expecting Gennrich to come into this fight and more or less continue what has got him here and tap into that wrestling right away. And if I had to make a lean on who I think is going to win this fight, I think Keegan Gennrich is the right guy for this one. This would be a really, really important win for him that would put him at 7-2 and presumably on the cusp of potentially getting a title shot. We'll see what happens. The LFA lightweight division, there are a few things that are in flux with that at the moment because we don't know what's going on with Aaron McKenzie. But in any event, this is a guy that has really impressed me as of late. I think he gets it done when he takes on Donald Bush later this week. We go up to middleweight when Alton Cunningham goes up against Darian Weeks. Cunningham 9-4 going up against Darian Weeks 6-3. Both of these men have experience fighting in the show. We may recall Weeks was in the UFC not that long ago. Alton Cunningham He has tried out on Dana White Contender Series 2 different times. He comes up short on both of those bids. But here we are, LFA 168, when both of these contenders try to get a much needed win for both of their careers. Interesting to note, this fight is happening at middleweight. And Darian Weeks, when he was in the UFC, he did compete in the welterweight class. He moves up to middleweight to take on Alton Cunningham, who is dropping down from light heavyweight in order to take this fight. It's been a bit of a bizarre run for Cunningham lately. He gets disqualified in his most recent fight, and then prior to that, he loses a split decision against Jesse Murray. That was probably a fight that he should have won, falls up short. Darian Weeks gets the job done against Muhammad Abdullah not that long ago. There was the bizarre fight against Johan Leones. I thought Weeks did enough to win that bout, but unfortunately, the people that matter, the 3 judges, they bizarrely gave that fight to Johan. I didn't see it that way. That was enough for him to get his walking papers, unfortunately. But he is a really good talent. He's still relatively young, only 29 years old. The biggest concern I have about this fight is his size. He's only 5'11". He's going up to 185 pounds. I have some concerns with that. I think he's too small for that weight class. And Alton Cunningham's a large man with a considerable height and reach advantage into this fight. For those factors, I'm leaning on Alton Cunningham. Those physical intangibles to me are very important. Skill-wise, technique-wise, Darian Weeks might be the more technically proficient fighter. But that size differential is notable, and nobody is really talking about that with Alton Cunningham. I think that might be enough to give him an advantage, though. I don't put too much stock into community predictions, but only 15% of the internet right now is on Cunningham. 85% is on Weeks. That's not really surprising. Who would pick Cunningham given the recent track record? But that physical size and height advantage might pay dividends for him in this fight. I will take a flyer. I will lean Alton Cunningham on this fight based off of this bout being contested at middleweight. Could certainly be a toss-up. Darian Weeks is the type of guy that he does start a little bit slow. So it'll be imperative for Alton Cunningham to put a stamp on this fight early. I'm taking a flyer on Alton Cunningham. And we'll see if he gets it done against Darian Weeks in what could be a coin flip. We move up to the co-main event at LFA 168 when Bobby Lee goes up against Lucas Clay. This fight will be contested at a 160-pound catchweight limit. Both of these men missed weight in their most recent bouts. Lucas Clay missed weight by over 5 pounds in his most recent fight. Bobby Lee, he ends up missing weight in his most recent bout as well. Both of these gentlemen agree to a 160-pound catch weight going into this contest. We'll start with Lucas Clay, a very dynamic fighter. This will be his first fight back since 2022. You may recall his bout against Aaron McKenzie that he ended up dropping by split decision a few years back. That was really a back and forth fight between both of those guys. For me, when I looked at that fight again with a fresh pair of eyes, I did feel that it was a tied fight going into the 5th. However you scored the 5th round was who you were going to give that fight to. I did believe that Lucas Clay stole that fight, though. I do believe that he should have been the LFA lightweight champion. But unfortunately for him, the judges didn't see it that way. That was a little bit surprising considering he had Aaron McKenzie on skates and the waning embers of that fight. Nonetheless, that one doesn't go his way. He does fight Austin Worms in the aftermath of that fight. Worms had no business taking that fight given that weight miss, but he ends up rolling the dice. It doesn't pay dividends for him. And Lucas Clay ends up doing what he needs to do to return to the win column. 93% of everybody is going to be on Clay for this fight. And how could you not be? The results have been there. He definitely looks like a young, dynamic, exciting fighter. Bobby Lee, The results just the record isn't great, and the recent results don't paint a flattering picture. But let's remember that he was in Bellator MMA and he was going up against some of the top contenders in the world. Here are a few of his losses. Joey Davis is against a 7-0 guy 2 years ago. Okay, not a whole lot there to raise an eyebrow at. He loses to Soren Back, and then he loses to Nick Brown. This is a fight against Estrazuelas that he should be sick about. I thought Bobby Lee was dominating this fight and was so close to finishing it. Unfortunately for him, he ends up getting caught up in a triangle choke and losing a fight that he should have won. He should be 14-8 right now, but unfortunately, MMA is a brutal game with a ton of consequences. And Bobby Lee dropped a disappointing bout in his most recent outing. He'll be looking for his 14th win when he goes up against Lucas Clay. I am fully expecting him to take a page out of Aaron McKenzie's book and try to shoot on Lucas Clay, get this fight down to the ground. He really excels there. His top control is really good. And I'm curious to see if he has what it takes to pull off the upset against Clay. I'm expecting Clay to come into this fight as the betting favorite. Bobby Lee 13-8. It's do or die time for him. In order to get back to the show, he's going to need to get results. He's going to need that 14th victory, and getting one over on somebody like Clay is certainly going to get eyes on him and potentially on the radar for a major promotion. As of right now, only 7% of the internet is on Lee. I do have a lean on Lee for this fight. I'm going to roll the dice a little bit. Lucas Clay is a dynamic fighter, but spates of inactivity. This is his first fight back in over a year, and he's going up against somebody like Bobby Lee, who's been in there against some of the best and who has home field advantage for this particular fight. I'm okay taking a flyer on Lee. That's where my lean is for this one. We move up to the main event where Mitchell McKee will be going up against Sean McPadden. Both two highly touted bantamweight prospects. McPadden 6-1. He had a notable win over Michael Sear in his last fight. And in order to get his 7th victory, he'll need to go up against Mitchell McKee. McKee knocked out Ira Lukowski in his most recent outing. That was quite a funny fight. Lukowski talks a little bit of smack to him, and McKee responds by knocking him down to the ground and getting a knockout victory. That was pretty memorable. And that was something that I think a lot of people laughed about when they saw that on Fight Pass not that long ago. But this is a meeting between two highly decorated guys. And when you look at it, you think about Mitchell McKee, you think about takedowns right away. I don't think he's going to be able to shoot in naked takedowns on Sean McPadden. McPadden is definitely going to be expecting that. But I think we kind of have a pretty good understanding of how McKee is going to want to try to fight. He is going to 100% tap into that wrestling as soon as he possibly can. But I would like to see McKee use his striking a little bit and not be in a hurry, not shoot a bunch of naked takedowns on Sean McPadden. That's a quick way to get knocked out against somebody like that. I do feel that McPadden's striking really isn't the best. I do feel that Michael Sear pieced him up pretty good in the opening round when those two met in the cage. So I'm curious to see if he's cleaned up his striking at all. Mitchell McKee, I want to see if he can string together some combinations on the feet in order to level change maybe a little bit more intelligently. This to me is a really difficult fight to pick, but if I had to lean in on who I think is going to become victorious, I'm going to go with Mitchell McKee for this one. There's a ton of hype behind him, and I usually fade a lot of hyped up prospects, but to me, I think Mitchell McKee is the right side for this one. Whoever ends up dropping this fight, that's gonna be one that stings because you have two top-notch level prospects, and a really good fighter is going to end up losing on September 22nd. I do believe that Mitchell McKee will be the one with his hand raised at the end of the night. Okay, guys, so that does it for me. Those are my predictions for LFA 168. Please join our community by subscribing. Later on this week, I'm going to be cranking out some interviews with some of the top regional MMA prospects in the world. I'd really appreciate your support. Thanks for checking this video out and enjoy LFA 168.